Welcome back to the Weekend Ball podcast. We are here after Canada's senior women's national team loses to Australia 70-65, and I'm joined by the editor-in-chief of Raptors HQ, someone that knows the WNBA Canada basketball very, very well, Chelsea Leite. Thanks so much for taking the time and coming on. How are you feeling? We'll try not to be too much in our feelings today, but what's kind of your initial reaction to that loss today?
I think it's just like I know disappointment is kind of I think a very strong word because you obviously don't want to like put that on the players, but I think just like disappointment at the situation in total and the fact that, it ended up being a close game and just a few minor things could have turned it around and made it a win for us. So I think just, the general sadness that comes along with the loss, but knowing that this one kind of means a little bit more because it may be the end for this team.
Mhm.
So yeah.
When you look back at this game and even going to the France, what's kind of maybe let this team down in terms of not being able to get over the hump is specifically tonight where, they were kind of in the game for most of it and then just at the end kind of just couldn't stay within reach.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in both of the games has been the turnovers and not taking care of the ball. This team, definitely improved from the first game to the second on many facets, but the one thing that I think still had them today was the turnovers and just and then Australia even didn't really capitalize on the turnovers as much as they could have, and still it wasn't um it was still a factor for them. And I also think that, they did a great job defensively and a great job of getting Australian foul trouble, but then at the end of the day couldn't make the free throws to make up for that and really take that advantage of that. So probably the two biggest factors in like the nitty-gritty of the game. And then I mean overall I think this team could work on maybe, growing their offensive power a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Bridget Carlton, who was just an absolute beast today, they
Yeah.
they really didn't get much from anyone. Kia Nurse, got 10 points, but not very efficiently. Kayla Alexander played well, but maybe didn't get the ball as much as, they would like in their offense. And it was really just tough for them to score. And then in that, end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter, they didn't score for 6 minutes. And, if they have 5, 6, 7, 8 points, they might win this game, right? And
Yeah.
just the offense has just let this team down, which is what was kind of the make or break heading into this tournament was could they score enough? And so far they haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely sucks because the talent on this team and individually, I mean, each player is very good and you've seen flashes of that in the other places that they play. And I think it sucks that when you bring them all together and you put them up against teams like Australia or these teams that have really big post players, really sharp shooters, and Canada's just kind of like missing like a piece or two to really be up there in that caliber with some of those teams. So it definitely sucks. I mean, I was just saying before on another thing that like you can't choose who is born in Canada. You can't choose what kind of
Mhm.
talent you have to work with, and you just got to work with what you have. And but it would be really, really fun if Canada had like a big sharp shooting, Caitlin Clark esque kind of player come up and just be someone who can get a bucket for them when they need it.
Maybe we'll have a mini Caitlin Clark with Silas Swords maybe one,
Yeah,
but who
exactly.
I thought actually played really well today and
Mhm.
defensively too, which is kind of where you think might be, not an area of strength, but I thought she played really well. But maybe, going to that point about, we can't choose who's born in Canada. Does it feel like maybe this team's we have the talent, but it's kind of in places that don't really necessarily complement one another in terms of, maybe a bit of overlap. We have a couple threes or fours, but we don't really have a point guard and stuff like well, we do have point guards, but not maybe at that same level that would maybe complement the team, even with the talent on board.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely something I was thinking about today when I was, thinking about how this team could succeed. You have a lot of talent in the front court. I mean, you have Kayla Alexander and Natalie Achonwa, who have been mainstays of this program for a long time. You have Aaliyah Edwards, who is coming up and has so much talent and is definitely the future of this team. You have, Letitia here, who is another great, forward and doesn't get as many minutes as she probably should have because you're trying to balance that with Kayla Alexander and Natalie and Aaliyah now. And And then you think about on the other side, we do have some talented shooting guards. Obviously, there's Bridget Carlton, who kind of can be in that 2 or 3 spot, and then you have Kia Nurse, who obviously again is another veteran. Sammy Hill was great today. She's always like very energetic on defense, can always, try and set up the offense as best as she can. But at the end of the day, I think there's is that balance because the most talent right now is coming out of, the front court. And then you kind of have to balance that with the backcourt. And I mean, obviously we know we have a lot of backcourt talent in Nurse and Carlton. And I think Sila coming up is a really great sign for Canada because you're about to have someone who, I mean, we haven't even seen how she plays in the college scope yet. She's 18. She just finished high school. And the fact that she's already being able to defend, players like Sammy Whitcomb, be able
Mhm.
to hold up physically against some of these FIBA players is such a good sign to think about where she could be in the future. So I do think that Canada's backcourt potential could kind of be maybe needs to kind of come up a little bit to match the front court potential that they have right now.
Do you feel like maybe we're obviously at any moment in time when you're at the Olympics you have different generations of players at different ages, but maybe we're really in a transition phase where you have the old crop of Kayla Alexander, Nat Achonwa, her fourth Olympics, and maybe we'll see maybe about 2028, probably not with either of them, but they're
Yeah.
just stalwarts. And then we have like Cass Prosper, Silas Swords, Yvonne Edgem, and other young players coming up, but that just aren't at that level right now. That maybe in 2028, we see kind of a younger group, but that is maybe more that fits together a bit, maybe a bit more total talent, and that right now we're almost in a transition era between generations.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The timing obviously is again something you can't control either. I think if you had Kayla Alexander now with Silas Swords 4 years from now and Aaliyah Edwards in a couple of years and Bridget Carlton now, like those players would mesh so well together if the timing worked out. And like you said, I mean, not to make any assumptions, but I think Natalie Achonwa has been very clear that this is her last
Mhm.
Olympics. Kayla Alexander hasn't said anything, but she's 33. And I mean, also Lauren Jackson is playing,
I
so
was
you
gonna
can't
say,
really you
yeah.
can't really make again any of these assumptions. But there's no it's not impossible that Kayla Alexander could play in 2028 or even in the next World Cup in 2 years, right? So I wouldn't count her out yet. And then you have the Kia Nurse and the Bridget Carltons who, you can assume that they're going to try for 2028 and beyond because they are, I'm the same age as both of them. I'm not old. So we're not old. We're going to be good in 2028. But yeah, and then you also have the young players. So it does feel like a transitionary period right now. And you do think about the next international competitions where, Kia Nurse and Bridget are going to be those like high end veterans. Maybe Kale Alexander is still in the mix, but then you have all of these young players coming in. You have Sila, you have Aaliyah, Yvonne. You also have Toby Fournier, who's definitely
Yep.
going to be coming up in that. I would say like probably the next big international competition that Toby's probably going to be coming up with that. And then who knows, you have Cass, you have other players who are going to, start aging into the program. So, Canada has a lot of potential basketball talent coming up. And I do think the scope of this team is going to look very different, even at the next World Cup. And um, I do think it's going to be like a youth movement coming up now
Mhm.
for Canada. I mean, it's the same with the US. It's the same with a lot of these teams who are saying goodbye to their very talented veteran players and kind of ushering in these new dynamic players. And, Canada just happens to be going through that maybe a little bit more and a little bit faster than some other countries.
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't know, but they won the silver medal at the U19s just like a couple, was it even last week? It was very recently, but
Yeah, I think it was U17.
U17, my bad.
U17, yeah.
Yeah, get the
Yeah, and
yeah,
Silas Swords' sister, Savvy, is coming
Abby.
up.
Yep.
Those two are going to be like a dynamic sister duo coming up for Canada, maybe even at the next Olympics. So that's exciting to think about.
Yeah, so but I mean, I guess maybe bigger picture with this team, like it will be, or hopefully not, fingers crossed. Maybe we get a bit of luck. Maybe the French beat up on the Nigerians, and Canada has a chance going into the final game. But it will be kind of back-to-back Olympics where, Canada kind of was expected to at least make the quarters. I think there was maybe a bit more higher expectations at the last Olympics than this one for this group, but and that they've kind of, not, achieved what they'd hoped to achieve. Do you think there's maybe, is it coaching? Is it, maybe players not delivering, or just kind of maybe just the luck of the draw? Because they did have a really, really tough group with France and Australia. It's no joke.
Yeah, and even Nigeria has been playing great. I mean, they
Yeah.
beat Australia. We'll see how they play against France today. I do think like everyone is saying group of death for the men, and that's true, but Canada made it the group of death in the men's side. I think Canada on the women's side were maybe on the losing end of that whole like group of death thing. And I mean, yeah, it I think it's a mix of a lot of things. I don't think that coaching is the biggest problem for this team. I mean, they have like I think the point in hiring Victor Lepena was getting a very veteran international coach, and I do think that he's motivated this team quite well. And you can see in their plays that they're giving themselves the opportunities that, and it's just the ball's not going in the hoop a lot of the time. It's the thing that is frustrating sometimes to watch with this team is that they're getting good looks and they're getting shot opportunities and it just doesn't go in a lot of the time, or they get into defensive or foul trouble, or they're not taking care of the ball. And like I do think that like it's those little things, it's the details right now that they need to work on, and like maybe going back to basics and focusing more on shooting development and stuff like that. And I mean, it's hard again when a lot of your talent is coming in the front court and you
Mhm.
have to kind of make up for that in the back court. But I do think it's not for lack of talent. I think it's just
Yeah.
bad luck with opponents and just needing to work on that offense. Because when you think about it, today's game could have been won if they were shooting better. Today's game could have been won, by making a few more free throws, by shooting better, by a couple of those
Mhm.
like
The veteran
uh
transition.
yeah, better in transition, better those a few of those offensive opportunities. They didn't lose through defense today. They lost because they didn't get the ball in the net.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even against France, like when they got blown out, like their defense was actually it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It was just their
Yeah.
offense was just stuck in a rut. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you alluded to it with the front court. They don't really have a lot of shot creators, and I think you're way more plugged into the WNBA than I am. I do watch it, but I'm not you. But it does seem as though Kia Nurse, maybe since her injury a couple years ago, kind of hasn't been that same player, and it felt like that, at this Olympics, even, for the Sparks as well. Like it just seems maybe that extra boost, but I don't know. I don't watch her day in and day
Yeah.
out, but it does feel like she's maybe not the same player she was, you
I
know.
do. I don't know. It's hard because at the beginning of the season, she looked like a better version of the player than that she was before her injury. She looked really, really good to start, and I don't know if maybe just like fatigue comes into it, or the Sparks have kind of had like a rough go of it as well. Maybe that is a factor, but she was playing so well to start the season, and I was like, oh, okay, like there's the Kia Nurse we all know. And so I don't know if that was just like a beginning of season burst, or if you're right and her injury has slowed her down. She's still a great player, excuse me. And I do think that it's the potential that's there. So yeah, I don't really know what happened with that, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, what's crazy just watching this game today. I thought obviously, Nat Achonwa has been kind of the face of the program for a long time, and the fact she had 7 assists is just like
Yeah.
wild to me. And she honestly could have had more. She found a bunch of people wide open underneath the basket, and it was just cool. Like obviously she missed some key free throws that maybe could have changed the game, but I thought she played really, really well, especially if this
Mhm.
is maybe her second, last game at the Olympics. I thought she balled out.
Yeah. I mean, you can't help but root for Natalie Achonwa. She's like you said, like a mainstay of this program. She's also just like such a good representative of Canada, such a good, has had such a long career in the WNBA, has been, she's that kind of player that kind of holds everything together. And I compare her a lot to Kelly Olynyk on the men's side because there's someone who can just like step into a Phoebe game and kind of put the team on her back and do anything that they need to give them a chance to win. And it definitely sucks that this is maybe how she's going out. in her professional career, but at the same time she has so much to be proud of, and she's such a great player and a great leader for this team. And hopefully it's not these losses that she's remembered for. It's the fact that she's been such a great leader and a great player for so long and had such a wonderful career, and did accomplish quite a lot in her time. So I think people sometimes forget that this team has made the Olympics quite a lot, and that's not easy to do. Like,
No.
you've seen the men try and try again, and finally they made it back this year. And the fact that the women have been making it for so long, I mean, that's an accomplishment in itself. I think we get lost when we get to the Olympics about the fact that being an Olympian in itself is such a huge accomplishment, and just being there is such a great moment in your career. And and then people are like, oh, if you don't win it doesn't mean anything, but it does. It means something just to be there. So hopefully that's not getting lost in all of this.
Yeah, for sure. And like I think people, you're much more plugged in than a lot of people. But the women's basketball, like the level is going up and up, like the men's across the world. It's obviously the US is very, very dominant in women's
Yeah.
basketball, even more so than the men's.
Hmm.
But you can see like teams like Germany, Japan made the finals in 2021. Like there's just a bunch of much more countries that are at that higher level. Nigeria beating Australia, right? Like
Yep.
it it's getting better. And just because Canada maybe isn't where it was maybe 3 4 years ago,
Yeah.
it's not as though like the team is bad or that
No.
they're not at a really high level. It's just I think maybe the world has caught up a little bit. And
Yep.
as we talked about, they're in that kind of transitional period where the it, the pieces don't fit as well as maybe they could. And but I think the future of this program, even though this is probably not going to be the Olympics people wanted from this group, it will still be a successful run. And as you said, 4 straight Olympics is I don't know, maybe they did that in like the 70s, but definitely kind of in modern times is something that this program hasn't done, and it's quite an achievement.
Oh, for sure. And like, yeah, the global game is, especially on the women's side, has just exploded over the past, couple of years. And I think that's, a benefit to maybe people scouting more in other countries. The benefit, like you look at the NCAA right now, the college landscape,
Oh,
and it's so many international players. And like, then you have people coming from Australia, you have people coming from Europe, you have people coming from literally every country now to play professional basketball. And the WNBA is just growing. And so I do think that the international game, it's not that Canada has gotten worse, it's that everybody else has just gotten better. And there's so many, international programs that are just raising the bar and getting more funding, and women's sports in general is getting more funding and could still get more, but it's a
mhm, of
process.
course.
And yeah, I think we're just going to see, I mean, countries like Germany and all of these countries now have WNBA talent. It's not to the level obviously of USA, but like you have these countries who now have these like WNBA talents. And so you saw it in the Olympic qualifying rounds. Like people might have thought that Canada was going to skate by in that, and they didn't. And it's just because there's so much talent.
Mhm. I guess with that, obviously there's a WNBA team coming to Toronto, and it feels like that might also be, if we're gonna put our, our glass half full, like that's gonna change like so many young girls in this country wanting to become WNBA players. Not that there aren't a lot that are right now with
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark and the WNBA on the rise and just women's sports on the rise, but I think that's going to be something that maybe we don't see the effects in 2028 and maybe not even 2030, but I think just the future of women's basketball in this country, like that's going to be such a huge effect, like the Raptors have been for basketball in this country as a whole.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about the fact that it's going to get more local, the fact that a team being here. Don't get me wrong, we've had such a burst of like community initiatives for young girls and young players. And excuse me, I know the Raptors are really good at, community outreach to young girls as well as young boys, but I do think that seeing professional basketball in Toronto on a regular basis is going to help so many people with visibility, and so many people understand like, oh, okay, this is something I can actually do. And I mean, like you said, it's happening anyway with Caitlin Clark and all these people, but it's different when you see it in your own backyard, when you see it live. And I do think that it's definitely going to help. And we're seeing the rise everywhere in Canada. It's professionally, we're seeing the rise of youth sports. And those programs getting more funding and getting more talent, and we're seeing more Canadians go to the NCAA than ever before. And I think it's just we're about to see a boom of Canadian basketball that we're seeing on the men's side because they've gotten more funding for as the past however many years. And I
Forever.
also yeah exactly. We're about to see there's I forget the exact statistic, but like so many girls drop out of youth sports faster than boys do, and I think having more professional women's sports for them
Mhm.
to see and more programming and more community outreach for them is just going to like make that number change so much. So I do think we're in an exciting time, not just for professional sports, but for young people who want to get into the business and
Mhm.
who want to have these like long careers and try and go to the Olympics and all this stuff, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, the WNBA team is definitely going to like help, and I do also think it's going to help people in other aspects of sports, not just the players. I think it's going to help people realize that like there's more coaching opportunities, there's more jobs, just like not just playing basketball, but like you don't realize until you get into sports that there's so many jobs on a team to think
Yes.
about. And people can be like, oh, okay, maybe I can't play basketball or I'm not, 6 foot tall. I'm not. But I maybe I could be a coach, or maybe I could be a development person, or maybe I could be a physiotherapist or this or that, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it just like builds this like culture of like, oh, okay, like sports
And
is not just about the players. It takes so much more.
not that it's the same sport, but I have covered the PWHL Ottawa
Yeah.
like very well, and like it's just
Yeah.
awesome to see so many young women like
Mhm.
in all the behind the scenes role and
Yeah.
roles, and just seeing all the little girls at the games. And I hope, I wanted to ask you, like, do you think that there's a possibility of maybe a domestic league for women's basketball? We have the Northern Super League coming out for soccer next summer. The PWHL was awesome this year. Like, do you think that's something, maybe not in the next 2 years, but kind of in the future, maybe with a WNBA team, maybe kind of accelerating that process?
Yeah, I do think that it would be great. I mean, you're seeing the like CBL and all the success they've been getting, and even if they just kind of like made like a WCBL or something like
Yep.
that, or kind of like built it through that, or I mean, we're seeing like locally in Toronto, there's Hoop Queens where they do like a series at the beginning of the summer. As well. And so like these small domestic things are starting to pop up, and the success of those will grow into more things. And I do think like something similar to the CBL on the women's side would be fantastic for the development of Canadian talent, and also, preventing a lot of these players from having to go overseas for so long. I mean, you think about our team, like our senior women's team, and only 4 of them are in the WNBA, and the rest have to go and play in Europe. Sammy Hill plays in Europe, Shea Colley, Kayla Alexander, like all of them, like they play overseas. And I think having a league would help them, be able to stay in Canada, develop, be able to attend more camps and do stuff like that. And yeah, so I mean, you're seeing the blueprint of it with these men's teams, and I think we're shifting culture to be able to support, women's sides of that a little bit more.
Before I let you go, and thanks so much, Chelsea, for taking the time. It just maybe your kind of final thoughts on, this game, or this team heads into the Nigeria game. Hopefully, fingers crossed, with something to play for.
Mhm.
Just kind of your final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of the result, this last game they're going to play with a lot of heart. It's going to be an emotional game for a lot of them, knowing that like we were saying, there's a transition happening in this program. And I think just at the end of the day, like we still have to remember that these players have done so much for our country and are such good representations of Canadian basketball and where it's going and the long-standing history that it's had. And I think just my thoughts is I'm just proud of them all, and I'm proud of
Mm.
the way that they put everything out on the court, the way that they come together. And I don't think that their shortcomings are really a reflection of who they are as players and how they are as a team culture. And so yeah, at the end of the day, I'm still going to support and be proud, and hope for the best for them. And even no matter which way it ends up going, I do think that this program has such a bright future. And we're doing all of the right things. And I think hopefully we can all come together and still cheer and be proud of them regardless of the result.
Well, all I want is the new WNBA team to just poach every Canadian player. That's in
Yeah.
free agency, or trade everything for Britta Carlton, and Kinners, bring back Nat Achonwa. We need to do it. We need to do it. So,
Yeah. Coach
um,
Nat, let's go.
let's do it. Let's go. Yeah. But is there anything you want to, plug for Raptors HQ or anything coming up that people should kind of keep their eyes and ears open for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing a lot of writing. If you've liked, the women's basketball side of the Olympics, the WNBA is going to pick up right after the Olympics ends, and so you can, check out my social media. I write for a bunch of sites about the WNBA, and then, we'll be back to NBA before you know it. So check us out on Raptors HQ, and yeah,
I think the WNBA season will be much more exciting than the Raptors season, but let's see. Let's
yeah,
see. But thanks so much, Chelsea, for taking the
thanks.
time and doing this, and
Yeah,
good luck with the rest of the Olympics, the WNBA, and then the Raptors season, which is feels like it's gonna come up right very, very quickly. So thanks so
yeah.
much for taking the time and coming on.
Thank you.